Hi there, I'm Kazak, and today I'll be covering the Death Knight class tree changes on the War Within Alpha and how they impact DPS TKs. I am primarily a Mythic Plus and Raid player, so this feedback will primarily be given through that lens. First, I'll do a brief rundown of the changes to the existing talents, take a look at the new talents added to the class tree, and then finally we'll wrap up with some example loadouts to give us an idea of how the changes impact us. So first up, what they've changed with the class that was there. Rune of the Stone Skin Gargoyle can now be rune forged on one-handed weapons. This is generally positive. There maybe will give us another option for dual wield builds. It remains to be seen. Can't comment on this too much right now until we see the Frost tree changes, but it's nice to have just more rune forge options, period. Speaking of those, Rune of Hysteria has been removed. This is great. We've been asking for this for a long time now. It introduced a lot of problematic resource generation into Frost. And on top of that, it was random in nature. You could definitely tell when Hysteria procced at the right time during your Breath of Sindragosa and when it didn't proc at the right time. So this, overall, I'm very happy to see this gone. Next up, Rune of the Apocalypse has been updated. They buffed it pretty heavily. Unfortunately, it looks like it'll still pretty much be Fallen Crusader everywhere because Rune of the Apocalypse keys off Ghoul, and while that's not a problem for Unholy, Fallen Crusader is still just better, and then obviously for Frost we can't have the Ghoul up all the time. Empower Rune Weapon was taken off the class tree. I'm a little sad to see this go. This feels like a change that Frost mainly caused. And it's affected the other two specs. I feel like it's a shame for Unholy and Blood to lose this, but they're changing all three of the specs, so maybe when we get to the other side, we don't notice it missing at all. Next, we have Abomination Limb no longer grants Bone Shield, Runic Corruption, or Rhyme based on specialization. I am really not a fan of this. On the one hand, I do see what they're going for by making Limb purely about mob control, and I guess damage, but it's not great at mob control just because you can't pick what it pulls and it's got a short range. So getting those bonus rhyme procs was nice. It was really nice on Blood for helping with Bone Shield management. So I'm sad to see this one go. Next up, Chains of Ice and Anti-Magic Shell are now baseline spells you get early on. This is good. It gives us more points to spend in the class tree. It lets us, take talents that modify our abilities instead of having to spend all of our points just picking up the active abilities. Assimilation now reduces the cooldown of Anti-Magic Zone by 30 seconds, no longer increases runic power when absorbing damage. Obviously the cooldown change is great, makes it more flexible to use. No longer giving runic power is something I feel mixed about. I know a lot of people didn't like having to decide between using AMZ when they wanted resources versus when their raid wanted it. I typically felt that, if it's a good use for your raid, it's a good use for your resources, and I can build my resource cooldown plan around when AMC is going to hit. But I also understand they just want to take resources out of it entirely, take more resources out of the class tree, and this will probably just feel better for everyone overall to have it work this way. I spent Fortitude cooldown reduced by 60 seconds. This is just baseline and acclamation. Not a ton to say here. This does feel kind of powerful for blood, but I'm not a blood expert. I just play it to get into keys, so I will refrain from commenting too much more on that. Also, we have Might of Thracian, Merciless Strikes, and Clenching Grasp all being removed. The first two were completely forgettable, just passive stat talents. And Clenching Grasp was just slowed enemies you gripped. I don't know if anyone ever took this talent, so I'm glad to see what, you know, wasn't exciting, what wasn't working is being replaced. And then finally, the big one here, Cleaving Strikes now also retains bonus effects for being within your Death and Decay for 4 seconds when leaving its area. This is the Jadefire Stomp treatment. This is how it works, at least on Mistweaver. It's the only monk spec I've played recently, where you stomp, you get the ground effect, but then if you need to run out, you keep the buff going. Currently on alpha, this means our D&D technically lasts for 14 seconds because when it fades, it refreshes the 4-second buff. I know that for some people this is not what they wanted to see, mainly due to obliteration cleaving, but for me at least, it was clear from some of the blue posts when the hero talent tree preview dropped for Rider of the Apocalypse that they were planning to keep Cleaving Strikes the way it was, and so if we're going to continue to play in a world where obliteration cleaves, then I think this is a fair trade-off to get between, you know, needing to properly use a ground effect in order to unlock that powerful cleave, with, you know, making sure you don't lose that cleave because mobs are just spewing stuff anywhere. I think of the spirit section of Naka Defensive, and you just can't ever sit still in that section, and being able to dip in and out of D&D would make that feel a whole lot better. So I'm overall very positive on this change. I kind of think it's the best outcome we could have hoped for, short of, you know, Cleaving Strikes affecting something else besides Obliterate and the entire Obliteration AoE profile being reworked. So with the existing stuff covered, I did skip over some of the minor stuff like Blood Scent Leech going up or Blood Draw being reworked, and I'll cover why I skipped that in a moment. Let's talk about the new stuff for a second here. So first we have Subduing Grasp. When you pull an enemy, the damage they deal to you is reduced by 4% for 6 seconds. This is a 2-point node, so 8% at full rank. This is really not exciting as a DPS player. Typically in group content, enemies we grip aren't doing damage to us directly, or if they do, it's off of a cast that they're doing to do later. You know, we grip and they're meleeing the tank, or they're casting something and we grip and stop. So when I think of what are situations where I could use this, I'm not coming up with a whole lot. The best thing I can throw out right now is maybe in Delves. I've tested a few of those. That's kind of the best case I can come up for this, but even then, I'm not sure if all of the bosses for Delves will be grippable. So overall, I'm really not sure what the use for this is. It's a very weak DR on a very short duration, that even for Blood, I don't think they're excited about this. Next new talent is Osmosis. Anti-Magic Shell increases healing received by 15 or 25% depending on rank. This is my favorite of the new talents, even though it's still a little bit confusing. The best part about this is it gives Anti-Magic Shell a use on physical heavy encounters where it would otherwise be a dead button. You can at least press it to help your healer top you faster. Outside of that though, this one's a little confusing. Typically, like, the whole way AMS works is you AMS before the damage and then it stops the damage. In order to need a significant amount of healing after AMS, you need to take a ton of damage, like so much damage your healer's probably already popped a cooldown. Like, this is, to me, seems like it's for people who whiffed AMS. You know, you forgot to AMS before the cast and then got chunked, and then you panicked and pressed AMS, and now you get some benefit. But overall, the design of increasing healing received when you use an ability that blocks damage doesn't click for me. Next up, null magic. Magic damage taken is reduced by 15%, and the duration of harmful magic effects against you are reduced by 35%. This is the big one. Currently the tooltip does say 10% on alpha. We'll see what the intended value is. The big one, of course, is the reduction of harmful magic effects. This shapes up to be very powerful in most situations. The game has shifted towards magic damage heavy encounters as of late. Certainly anyone who's played Frost is aware of this. You can AMS for RP everywhere. This is the kind of the main avenue by which Long Breath has gotten its name. A lot of it is due to just how often you could AMS for full value, so that means there's a lot of magic damage coming out. Passive 10% DR against that is very strong, and then reducing duration of dots and debuffs is potentially very strong, potentially has some unintended side effects. If you think about something like Remnant of Ner'zhul from Sanctum of Domination, or the ring mechanic from Neltharion, I'm blanking on the name, but you get the circle and have to run out. Both of those were on timed debuffs, and having those debuffs run out faster can potentially grief your raid. So we'll have to see how that works out. It may cause some conflicts where you end up having to swap out of null magic so that you have sufficient time to react to a debuff. And if you do swap out of null magic, you'll be picking up Vestigial Shell, which is on a choice node with null magic, and this makes it so that casting anti-magic shell grants 2 nearby allies a lesser anti-magic shell that absorbs magic damage and reduces the duration of harmful magic effects against them by 50%. So I'll say first, the lesser anti-magic shell is a lot weaker than your anti-magic shell. Just to put some numbers to this, right now I have 2.8 million health on alpha. An anti-magic shell absorbs 1.4 million magic damage. Lesser anti-magic shell absorbs 136,000 magic damage. It is currently very small, and most of the power is in reducing the duration of harmful magic effects. This also only affects 2 allies. Currently assume that means based on position, but I haven't been in a group big enough to test this yet, so we will have to see how that pans out. The kind of main use for this would be if like a group-wide dot is coming out, you AMS and 2 of your allies get less of that dot. In the right use case, it could be quite powerful, but the 2 allies thing does introduce some usability issues. Okay, you've helped 2 people in a key, that's still 2 other people who have to figure out what to do with it, or just 1 person, because if one of those 2 is the tank, they should be fine. In a raid, you've got most of your raid unable to deal with it. If it's position based, does that mean your raid's going to make you run out and stand somewhere so that people can run out and get their debuff reduced off of you? Who knows? This one's interesting. I currently don't feel great about it, but as we get closer to launch and see the dungeons and see the raids, this may start to look more powerful. Next up, something we can cover real quickly: Ice Prison. Chains of Ice now also roots enemies for 4 seconds, but its cooldown is now 12 seconds. This is PvP talent primarily here for CC. Not much to say. Hope PvPers are happy with it. It gives us another CC option. Finally, on the new talent list, we have Rune Protection. Your chance to be critically struck is reduced by 3%, and your armor is increased by up to 6%. This stinks for DPS. I've been told this stinks for Blood too, but those who are unaware, the way this works, this does not mean you get a 6% reduction against physical damage. Rather, this increases your armor rating, which you can see on your character sheet, by 6%. If you talent and untalent this, you will see that this shakes out to be about a 1% physical damage reduction. Physical damage is something we are already not taking a whole lot of as DPS, making this overall just a waste of 2 talent points. We never want to take this. This unlocks Blood Draw. Blood Draw has been reworked so that after it procs, you take less damage for 8 seconds and your Death Strike is cheaper. Potentially interesting, except we will never want to sink the 2 points into Runic Protection to unlock this. So overall, I'm not big on it. So let's go ahead and fill out the class tree for a raid fight. Let's say something like Gnarl Root, something, pretty basic. It's not going to require any super specific talent picks, has some AoE. And then from here, we'll look at maybe a couple other raid fights to sort of get a sense of how this shuffle has done for giving us more points to play with. So to start off with, we want to just pick up our basic abilities, Death Strike and Raise Dead, and then obviously we're going to want Cleaving Strikes, it's AoE, and then Unholy Ground is free stats, and it unlocks Veteran of the Third War for us, so that's great. We also want to pick off Brittle because it's throughput, and then we'll take March of Darkness, which is positioned quite well now to feed into Unholy Bond. We'll take Cold Thirst, Runic Attenuation, and Anti-Magic Barrier. And we know Anti-Magic Barrier is almost always strong in raids. Runic Attenuation is throughput. So here we've unlocked some more of the tree. We can take Unholy Bond, Soul Reaper, and Unholy Endurance to kind of finish off this right side. Over on the left side, we can pick up Icy Talons to get the last of our DPS throughput through the section, but we do have 6 more points to spend here, so let's pick up some good defensives. IBF is really good, Gloom Ward's really good, AMZ and Assimilation are really good. I did skip over Improved Death Strike here. It's typically not as great in raids. It really depends on what fight it is for DPS specs. Some fights you're going to want this, but some fights, if you're rock solid, this isn't going to do anything for you, so you may want to spend your points elsewhere. Just for fun here, we're pretending it's Gnarl Root. Let's say I'm going to take Wraithwalk to sprint out with my circle. And then finally, I'm going to go ahead and pick up Suppression here, just so I can go ahead and hit Rune Mastery. And then finishing off the bottom here, we're kind of left with a lot of choices. The Rune Mastery is the only offensive throughput. Strictly speaking, Death's Echo is also offensive throughput if you're using Death and Decay often enough, so a little bit iffy there. We'll go ahead and take that just to path down to Null Magic. Here we've still got 5 points that we're now pretty much allowed to just spread out based on what defensive capabilities we might want. So we can take Insidious Chill just because it was asked for. Some fights this is effective, some fights it's not. We'll say this fight is one of those. We'll take Permafrost just because it's a free shield. We'll take Blood Scent for the free leech, and then we'll finish off, let's say, 2 points and build a Necropolis. So overall here, we've definitely been freed up to kind of tailor our utility to the fight. Now you may notice I did not pick Abomination Limb here, even though I did compare this to Gnarl Root. I would have to say, I think in the War Within, we're gonna get used to relying on Death Grip primarily to do ad control and to pull mobs in, and that's because Subduing Grasp is just so unappealing to spend points on. Yes, this is technically offensive throughput. If you want to parse, you'll take this. And there are fights where even the short range and random nature of this are still helpful, so you have to evaluate on a case-by-case basis. But just because this tax is so high to unlock it, I think we will definitely see what we can do with Death Grip before we go to Limb, because you know, we can take these 3 points and dump them into things that are maybe more helpful for the raid. We can take Insidious Chill, we could take Assimilation, we can take Blinding Sleet, we can take Asphyxiate if that's required. And all of these, to me, offer more value than randomized grips. We have things like Evoker knockbacks and Blast Wave. This, I think, really came through on Farak, where most DPS TKs didn't even talent Abomination Limb. But we'll see. This take may age like sour milk. We'll see here. So from here, we can look at another scenario. Let's say we're filling out for a key. So Insidious Chill, it depends on the key, depends on the tank. We'll just say again, the tank's asked for it, so we're taking it. Next up, AMZ, something we may not take by default in keys. It just depends on if you have a use for it. We'll leave it there for now, but you know, we can swap Wraithwalk out here and pick up Blinding Sleet. We could drop a point of Will of Necropolis and take Grip of the Dead. And we could say, you know what, let's not take Leech, let's not take Asphyxiate, let's take Will of the Necropolis and Improved Death Strike. For keys, you'd almost certainly take Improved Death Strike. We tend to get a lot more value as DPS specs in keys with this talent. To wrap all this up, I do think that from this top section of the tree, they did a pretty good job with what they set out to do. We have more points to play with, the pathing's a lot friendlier. I feel like we're in a better position now to flex our utility to what's needed for the encounter. But on the bottom 6 here, what we've previously referred to as capstones, I'm not excited about this square here. I don't want to path through Runic Protection ever. I would really prefer to not path through Subduing Grasp if I can help it. And Osmosis, it feels bad. It just feels like a 2-point tax, but it at least gets me null magic, so I'm excited about that, I guess. My main hope is that, you know, over the next few builds, we see something different done with this section of the tree here. Maybe drop these down to 1-pointers or make them stronger, rework their effects. I don't know. I don't quite know what the answer is or like what the final vision is. Obviously, a lot of this is just kind of given in a vacuum. You know, there could be changes for Frost and Blood that change our opinion of the class tree. I don't know. But first impression is just that these don't feel good to take. They don't feel exciting to take. They just feel like point dumps for the most part. So that wraps this up. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments, and I may do this again for the Frost tree.